Page 69. So the mitzvah of Pesach, which is midoraisa from the Torah, an obligation. You lifted the pen? Yeah, okay, thank you. That is eating the matzah. Then the Rabbanan, the Chachamim, instituted that we should also drink 4 cups of wine. The pen? Okay, the pen. That we drink 4 cups of wine. So that's also mitzvah the Rabbanan. And we're going to explain a little bit what is the meaning of the 4 cups of wine. So the reason that's given in Gemara, in Halacha, why do we drink 4 cups of wine, is because in the Chumash, when it describes Geula, it gives 4 terms for Geula. So let's see the pasuk inside on page 70. Turn to page 70. So this is the pasuk in Pashas Va'era, where it says, and underlying them all, V'hoitzeisi, I will bring you out of Egypt. Then it says, V'itzalti, I will save you from slavery. Then it says, V'ga'alti, I will redeem you. And then it says, V'lakachti, and I will take you. So being that it uses 4 different languages, V'itzeisi, Hitzalti, Ga'alti, V'lakachti, corresponding to that, we use and we drink 4 cups of wine. If you notice, there's a 5th one that's underlined where it says, V'hevesi, I will bring you. The difference between the first 4 and the 5th one is, the 5th one is not about Egypt. It's about, I will bring you into Eretz Yisrael. But the first 4 is about going out of Egypt. So the truth is the 5th one is also about redemption. And that's why there's also a 5th cup. Where is there a 5th cup? And that is the Kais Shel Eliyahu, the cup of Eliyahu Navi. That's in a sense the 5th cup, thank you. And that corresponds to the 5th term that's used, the Hevesi. So, again, on the surface, it just seems, okay, it says 4 languages, Geula, so therefore we have 4 cups of wine. To go into a little bit more, more depth to it. The depth to it is that it's not just 4 different languages, but they actually represent 4 different stages of redemption. So if you look at the page 69, back to 69, number 2, there are 4 Golusim. We don't count Mitzrayim because Mitzrayim is sort of the general Golus, the beginning of all Golusim. So besides Mitzrayim, we have the Golus of Babel. We were Golus in Babylon. Paras is when we were in Golus in the times of Purim. Yavan, the Greeks, is when we were in Golus in the times of Hanukkah. And Edom, that's the Golus we're in now. Edom is Rome, and they're the ones who destroyed the second Beis Hamikdash, and since then we're in Golus. So there are 4 Golusim, and when Mashiach comes, we're going to go out of the 4th Golus. So that means that when the Torah says, I will take you out of Mitzrayim, on one hand, it's referring to Mitzrayim, but there are 4 different words that are used, different languages, because there are 4 stages in leaving Mitzrayim. But it also alludes to another thing, that in the long run, there's going to be 4 Golusim. And one of them is to go out of Babel, one is to go out of Paras, and one is to go out of Yavan, one is to go out of Edom. And that's why we drink 4 cups of wine, representing the exodus of all these 4 Golusim. This is also the reason why we have 4 questions. We know there are a lot of questions to ask on Pesach. So many things are different. But generally speaking, we all know that this is the famous words we use, the Fir Kashas, the 4 questions, that it's also structured in the number 4. So that's because there are 4 languages of Geula. So therefore, many other things on Pesach are related to the number 4 questions. Another thing that's number 4 is the 4 Banim, the 4 children, the 4 sons. I mean, there's different ways of classifying things and categorizing things. So they could have also categorized this differently, but the Gemara says that if you look in the Chumash where it describes Pesach, it talks about how we should educate our children and how we should speak to them. And the Gemara says the Torah is giving us direction how to speak to 4 kinds of children. Obviously, there's much more than 4 kinds. There are many different kinds, but these 4 include all the differences that there are. And again, why 4? Because of the same reason. This is about Mitzrayim, about going out of Golus, and because there are 4 different stages, 4 different levels in the process, that's why it's also geared towards 4 children. And we know that the number 4 is also the whole structure of creation is in 4. There are 4 worlds: Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. And then we also know that everything in this world is made up of 4 elements, which is fire, air, Eish, Ruach, Mayim, and Ofar. The way the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, not only everything physical, but even things that are not physical, also made up of the 4 elements: fire, air, earth, and water. So I guess on one hand, we're saying that we went out of Egypt, but then there are 4 other governments that we have to leave. On the other hand, we're saying that even Egypt itself, but if you look at the words in the Torah, literally, going out of Egypt is described in 4 different ways. That means, so this is how it all comes together. It's going to get confused again, like the question yesterday, what's in what? But how it all comes together is that another way of things, the way they're structured, is they're structured in 4 groups. So we also know that the world is made up of Daimim, Sameach, Chaim, Medaber. We spoke about it this morning. In other words, Hashem's name that created the world is Yud, K, Vav, K, 4. And as a result of that, everything in the world, in some ways, is also broken up into 4 groups, 4 categories. So when we say that we went out of Egypt, let's remember, we're not just talking about a geographic change, that the Jews left this country and went out to another country. And not only physical labor, that before they were slaves and they worked very hard and they were being persecuted, and now we became independent. We left Egypt and now we're independent. We're not being forced to do hard labor. But the real redemption was a spiritual redemption. That before we were in Egypt and Klippa was dominating over us, and here we left Egypt, means we left that Klippa and we've become independent, and therefore now we're able to serve Hashem in an independent way. So being that everything is structured in 4, so when we left Egypt, there's also 4 stages in leaving Egypt. And for that reason, we have these 4 different terms. The 5th cup means that there's something even beyond the 4. So with Hashem's name, it's also the same thing. How many letters on Hashem's name? 4 letters, Yud, Ke, Vav, Ke. But remember we said on top of the Yud, what is that called? All the way on top of the Yud, it's called a crown. In other words, when you look in the Sefer Torah, on top of the letter Yud, there's little lines. Those are called crowns. So that means in Hashem's name, there's also 5 different levels. Or if you talk about the spheres, that the spheres are broken up into 4 groups, but what's on top of all the spheres is Hashem's crown called Keser. So therefore, the world is structured in 4, and then there's something which is above those 4. So here too is 4 cups of wine, and then there's something which is of a different category. There was the 5th cup. That's the one that's set aside for Eliyahu Navi, because he's in fact the one that's going to declare and let us know that Mashiach is here, that we're going out of Golus. So Eliyahu Navi is connected to redemption. And that's why that's the 5th cup. Yeah.
I still don't think I understand the 5th cup. Can you explain it again?
The 5th?
Yeah.
Again, the first 4 words are about going out of Egypt. We went out of Egypt, you took us out of Egypt, you saved us from Egypt, you redeemed us from Egypt. The fifth language is about going into Eretz Yisrael. So we said there are two stages. One is leaving Egypt, the other is going into Israel. So that means the fifth thing is sort of higher than all the four. Again, in the way the world is structured, which is Hashem's name is 4 letters, there are 4 worlds, there's 4 elements. In each of these structures that I just mentioned, there's 4, but then there's a fifth. What is the fifth? For example, there are 4 letters in Hashem's name, but on top of the Yud, there's a crown. We said yesterday that the 10 spheres are also structured as 4. Chochmah is 1, Bina is 2, the 6 spheres is 3, and Malchus is 4. What's above the 10 spheres? Hashem's crown, called Keser. So there's a 5th level. If you they talk about the 4 elements, there's fire, air, earth, and water. There's also something in the 5th. What's the 5th? The 5th is the essence of it. The structure is fire, air, earth, and water. But then there's the essence, which is not fire, not air, not earth, water. That sort of brings everything together. So that's the 5th thing. And now in Neshama, by the way, we also have the 4 levels. There's Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya. What's the 5th level? Yechida. That's the highest, that's the most spiritual, that's infinite, that's unconditional. So the number 5 always represents the something which stands above the general structure of 4. So here too, the 5th cup, we don't drink it, but it's given for Eliyahu Navi because the 5th cup corresponds to redemption. So even though we're not going to go into now what are those 4 stages, but at least to understand that we're celebrating going out of Mitzrayim, and we're celebrating that we went out of Mitzrayim in all 4 levels, in all 4 stages. On a personal level, we also go out of Mitzrayim, but just as an example, this morning, I think we learned about 4 levels. Not everybody was here this morning, but we learned this morning that when a person does a mitzvah, there are 4 levels. You remember that? There are mitzvahs which you do the action. Before you do the mitzvah, make a bracha, that's speech. Then you do the mitzvah and you have kavanah. There's a kavanah which is sort of more natural. You don't have to put so much into it. You don't have to produce new feelings. Then the highest level is where through learning and meditation on the greatness of Hashem, we're inspired with a whole new level of feeling. So Alter Rebbe explains that these are 4 levels in a person. It means on a personal level, when I'm going out of my personal Mitzrayim, it means that I'm doing something which enhances the way I do the mitzvah, the way I speak about the mitzvah or make the bracha, the way I feel about it on level 1, and the way I feel about it on level 2. So when we talk about personal redemption, there's also 4 levels. So even though it's very hard to go into every single detail, but the general idea is that it's not just 4 cups because it resembles something, but every time I drink a cup, it makes an impact on me on a personal going out of Mitzrayim, 1 level deeper than the other.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's relevant or smart to ask about why specific with wine? Why not water? Because, like, for example, it represents the Nile and the miracle. The water and
that's a general question. Why do we always have wine for
Yeah.
Kiddush, for Shabbos, for Yom Tov? First of all, in the Mizbeach, there was water, but that was only once a year on Sukkot. All year long, it was mainly wine. And one of the reasons why we always associate wine with something that's holy, like Shabbos or Yom Tov or 4 cups of wine here, is because I think we mentioned it, that it says, Mishenichnas yayin yotza soid. When wine goes in, the secrets come out, which means that wine has in it a spiritual property, that when we drink wine, it opens up chambers that are normally closed in a person. And it also opens up in heaven, doors that were normally closed, open up and more godliness is revealed. So when we drink, that's why there are stories of tzaddikim like Nadav and Avihu. They drank wine and they were so overcome with emotion for Hashem that they expired, they died. Because drinking the wine opens up doors that were closed and are meant to be closed. But on Shabbos and Yom Tov, godliness is revealed. And we want to be able to feel a little bit of that. So we drink wine, again, in a measured way. But the purpose of the wine is to be able to absorb things that are normally hidden, and they open up and they reveal. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's go to page 71. 71, we're going to go into how we find that in many ways, going out of Mitzrayim and going out of this Golus are similar. In many ways, they're different. So we're going to go through a list of things in which way we see it's similar and which way we see that it's different. And what's the reason for that? Why are they similar and why are they different? Why are they different? I think that's simple. It's a different story. That was Egypt. That was 3,300 years ago. And now it's a different world, a different time, a different circumstances. So it should be different. But no, we find that there's a lot of similarities. And in many ways, going out of this goal will be similar to that. And yet, if it's similar, why isn't it similar all the way? No, in some ways it's different. So let's start with page 73. 72 is the page that's blank, so don't worry about it. Those have the real deep secrets. If you pour wine on it, it'll get wet. Yeah, okay. So this is the pasuk. We quoted the pasuk yesterday. Pasuk the Rebbe quoted thousands of times probably. It's a pasuk in Micha, one of the later prophets, and it says, Ki meitzeischam eretz Mitzrayim aren neflois. As in the days when you left Egypt, I will show wonders. Which means just like you saw wonders when you left Mitzrayim, that's how you'll see wonders when you will leave this current. Over there, it means the future Golus. So the pasuk itself tells you that you'll see wonders, but the deeper meaning to the words are not only you'll see wonders, but you'll see wonders that'll be similar to the ones that you saw when you went out of Egypt. That's what it means. Just like when you went out of Egypt, you saw a certain kind of wonders, you saw a certain pattern, you saw a certain way. When Mashiach comes, our going out will be similar. What's the reason for why is it similar? So the answer is, let's look on page 71. Remember, we just had a class on the difference between going out of Mitzrayim and receiving the Torah. That going out of Mitzrayim was like the first stage of the marriage, and receiving the Torah is the second stage of the marriage, right? Look at number 7, Erusin and Nisuin. Which means just like when a woman gets married, there's the 2 stages, the giving the ring and then the chuppah. So when Yidden had our marriage with Hashem, the first stage was going out of Mitzrayim, and the second stage was standing by Har Sinai receiving the Torah. The Medrash says that on a much larger scale, this is the difference between going out of Egypt and going out of this Golus. Going out of Egypt would be compared to the first stage of our marriage. And when we go out of this Golus, that'll be the final stage of our marriage. So we've been working on our marriage a very, very long time, over 3,300 years. I guess the therapist is Torah, and we're working on it, and hopefully it'll work out. So what does it mean in simple words? How can we explain this in simple words? Simple words, marriage is about 2 people becoming one. And this is also about us and Hashem becoming one. So when the Torah was given, we became one. But obviously that oneness is incomplete. It's not 100% absolute. Because first of all, we see that after that we did Averis, we did the golden calf, we went back into Golus. The world still has a lot of klipa in it. That means that the oneness between Hashem and us, or Hashem and the world, is not complete, not absolute. When Mashiach will come, that oneness will be so complete and so absolute, there'll be no Yitzhahara, there'll be no Averis, there'll never be Golus again, there'll never be the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Everything will be in the perfect way, Begashmis and Baruchnius. So basically, that means that these are 2 stages in how we and Hashem are one. And that's why the first is Erusin and the second is Nisuin. But we see from this another interesting thing. And that is that the 2 things that happened going out of Egypt over 3,300 years ago and going out of Golus now are not two separate incidents. It's like one long process that began over 3,300 years ago, and it'll be completed when Mashiach comes. Just like if we're comparing it to a marriage, just like the two stages of marriage aren't two separate things, it's one. Except Erusin is the first stage of the process, and Nisuin is the final stage of the process. And in between, we're getting ready. That means that just like we understand with Mitzrayim, going out of Egypt was the first stage of the process. Receiving the Torah is the final stage of the process. And in between is just part of the process. It's one process. In fact, we'll learn about this later, that in halacha, you want to ask a question? Yeah.
Yeah, what about the other goluses? What are they?
Are all part of the process. One of the ways we can see how it's part of the process is, we know the famous dream Yaakov had of a ladder.
Yeah.
And there are many interpretations, right, it was a prophecy. There are many interpretations what the ladder represents. One of them, I think it's even Rashi, says that the ladder represents the four gullus. These four. Paras, going out of Babylon, then going out of the time of Purim, and then going out of Golus in the time of Hanukkah, and going out of Golus in the future. If you think of it, if it's a ladder, what is a ladder? A ladder, each rung is not a separate thing. It's climbing up to a certain point. And you climb on one rung, then the second rung, the third rung, till you get to the top of the ladder. That means that this implies that going out of these Golusin is all part of a process. It began by going out of Mitzrayim, and every Golus is every Geula. After that, the Geula of Babel and the Geula of Purim and the Geula of Hanukkah is all additional stages of us becoming further away from Golus and closer to the complete Geula. So they're all stages. So what I wanted to say is that Shavuos is the only yontif that has no date. People don't realize it because on the calendar there is a date, but halachically Shavuos has no date. In the Torah, Shavuos is not the 5th day of Sivan, not the 6th, not the 7th. It's the 50th day from Pesach. And in the times where they used to do the month according to when they saw the new moon, it wasn't always on the same day. It was different days of the month. Only now that we have a fixed calendar, it's always on the 6th day of the month, on the Vav Sivan. But generally speaking, before those days, it was not always. How come it doesn't have a date? Every yontif has a date. And the answer is because in a sense, Shavuos is not a yontif itself. Shavuos is the culmination of going out of Mitzrayim. Like the Kiddushin is the beginning of the process, and the chuppah is the culmination of the process. So therefore, it doesn't have a date because it's 50 days after the first stage. So when we go out of this Golus, it's also the culmination of going out of Mitzrayim. Based on that, we can understand both things. On one hand, we're going to see similarities because it's really the same thing. It's part of the same process. It's all the marriage between us and Hashem. On the other hand, being that it's different circumstances and we've gone through a lot, that was the beginning and this is the end, so there'll be differences. So now we'll go into a little bit to see what are the differences and what ways are they the same. One of the differences is you can see on page 74. This pasuk, in fact, is in the Haftorah, which we read on Achosh Pesach. So the copy you're looking at is from the Siddur. It says Hashem will dry up the gulf of the Egyptian blank. There's a word missing. In Hebrew, V'hechem Hashem es l'shayin yam Mitzrayim. There'll be a gulf of an Egyptian body of water. Hashem will lift his hand over the river, and then they say, which river? The Euphrates, and his mighty wind, and smite it into 7 streams, and cause men to cross over in shoes. It'll be dry land. So here alone, you see similarity and differences. Just like they went out of Egypt, the sea split, the same thing will happen when Mashiach comes. but it's not the same sea. That was a different sea, and this is a different sea. How many lanes did the sea split when they went out of Mitzrayim? 12. How many lanes will it be split over here? 7. So there's difference, and it's the same. Later we have a class, we'll go into Kriyas Yamsuf, we'll go into the reason why that's that difference. But here we see an example of how they're in some ways similar. The sea will split again, and in some ways it is different. Another example of how it's going to be similar is look at page 82. (82A) and 83. This is Parsha Shmos. This is the part of the story Moshe already came to Paro, and he told him the Yidden have to be freed from Mitzrayim, let them leave. Paro got very upset, and he said, "You are lazy. Therefore, you say, let us go sacrifice to Hashem." And what was his reaction? And now get to work. You won't be given any straw. You have to deliver the same quota of bricks as you did before, and we're not providing you with the materials that you need for it, which means now the work became so much harder. And they'll be whipped for not providing the amount of bricks that they need at the end of the day. Look at Pesach 20. So again, the officers of Bnei Yisrael realized their bad position, saying, you must not reduce your daily quota of bricks, even though now you need to get the material yourself, the straw. They met Moshe and Aaron, who were waiting to meet them as they were leaving Paro, and they said to them, this is what they said to Moshe and Aaron. Look at page 82a. Hashem should look at you and judge you. You ruined our impression, our reputation in the eyes of Paro, in the eyes of his servants. You put a sword on all of us to kill us. That's how they spoke to Moshe and Aaron. Moshe returned to Hashem and he said, Hashem, why have you brought harm to his people? Why did you send me? Ever since I came to Paro to speak in your name, it has done harm to the people. So Hashem answered him. Look at Pasuk 1. Hashem said to Moshe, now you will see that what I will do to Paro. So what happened here? Moshe goes to Hashem goes to Moshe, tells him, tell Paro to go out of Mitzrayim. We're going out of Mitzrayim. This should be the time of rejoicing, celebration, good news. Instead, the slavery becomes much worse than it was ever before. Moshe goes back to Hashem and complains. And Hashem says to Moshe, now you will see. What's the answer to his question? So this is in Hebrew. I'm not going to go into it word for word. I'll just tell you what it says. Page 83. There's a commentary on the Chumash, which those of you who are on level 3 Chumash do it from time to time. Kli Yakar. So the Kli Yakar says, what does Hashem mean? Now you will see. This is the answer. You might have heard this, but here's the source where it comes from. The answer is, it says like this, that it's known, the part that I'm reading from is the second paragraph, which begins with the word Veheshiv. Hashem answered him. It's known that this is the natural order. Every day, as it gets close to the break of dawn, the darkness of the night is the darkest moment right before the break of dawn. And I think that's the reason why it's called the break of dawn, because it gets very dark and all of a sudden it gets light. Another thing, most people, when they're sick, critically ill, right before they're passing, somehow they gather strength, they sit up on the bed, they ask to eat something, and right after that, unfortunately, they pass away. A third example is, in the winter, right before sunrise, the cold of the night is the strongest, and then the sun comes up. What's all this about? So the answer is, the way he explains it, that the nature of everything in the world is when it feels threatened and it feels that its last moments are coming, It sort of fights with every fiber of its being. It's called the fight for survival. It fights with every fiber of its being that it should not be destroyed. So in a sense, when a person is, God forbid, very sick, and the neshama feels that the opposite of life is taking over, the neshama fights the strongest, and that's why you see certain strength before you didn't see it. In fact, sometimes people think, wow, they're getting better, and then all of a sudden, the end comes. Because at that moment, right before the end, the neshama fights its strongest fight to preserve its life. When darkness feels that it's being overtaken and overcome by the light, by the sunlight, then the darkness sort of fights its last fight for survival. So the last moments of the night, right before sunrise, is the darkest point of the night. And the same is with cold, that when coldness feels that the sun is rising and now it is going to get warmer, and the warm sun is going to overpower the cold night, so the cold fight is the last fight for survival. What does all this have to do with the price of fish in China? The answer is that when Klippa, Paro, felt that his end is coming, and now Moshe is coming, and Kedusha is coming, and it's going to be destroyed, Klippa fought its strongest fight for survival. That was Hashem's answer. What you're seeing is not that, God forbid, that your words didn't help, and that we're not going out of Golus, and that Mitzrayim is becoming stronger than before. On the contrary, the reason why Mitzrayim is acting worse now than before is because it's coming to its end. And that's why it's fighting its worst right than before. So Mefarshim say that just like this happened in Mitzrayim, we're going to see the same before Mashiach comes. That unfortunately, in certain ways, there'll be more darkness before the break of dawn. In other words, we're living in a time, let's say, where the Rebbe told us that we look around and see certain things. It shows us clearly how Mashiach is coming, and yet we see other things which are really the opposite, almost like an increase of darkness, an unprecedented darkness in many different ways. Like, for example, right now, there's a rise of anti-Semitism that they say has never been since World War II. So someone who doesn't have the words of the Rebbe, it's a good reason to be really terrified. Who knows what's happening? Where are we going? What's going to be? This is a rise in anti-Semitism across the board. On the other hand, if we look at the Rebbe's Sichos, we say, just like with Paro, that yes, there's a rise in anti-Semitism, it's true, but that's not because Chas v'Shalom we're further away from Gula. On the contrary, this is one of the symptoms of what happens when Golus feels that it's coming to an end. And the same thing with other things that appear to be the opposite of Gula. Yeah.
Is that like just before Mashiach is supposed to be like a very, very big war that hasn't been occurring?
So the Holocaust is something which is predicted in Tanakh that is going to be something terrible that never happened before. And all the leaders of Jewry from all ends of the spectrum all said there's no question that is what the Holocaust was. So we went through that big one.
So they said that's
yeah, that's why since then, right. You're thinking about Gog and Magog, that's another thing. Yeah, so there's a question whether that war is, it's a prophecy, so we don't know if it's physical, if it's metaphoric, and if some say it already happened, that's another discussion. But no doubt that the negative things we see today is not a detour or, God forbid, that something went wrong in the plan. On the contrary, this is, and the Rebbe pointed out a few things, when the Rebbe used to speak about it, that seem to be the opposite of going towards Geula, that it's part of the process of Golus fighting its last fight for survival. So that's one of the things that it says, we'll see it happen before Moshe comes also. Another thing that's similar is, look at number, I'm jumping, but I think it's just going to be easy to follow. Number 5 on the list, where it says they didn't listen to Moshe because they were drained, they were out of breath, and so on. So they didn't listen to Moshe because the Golus was so severe that when Moshe came with the news that you're going out, it just didn't register. They couldn't believe it. It didn't sound like it's real. I once saw an article where a woman wrote that she was in one of the camps, and they told them that they're transferring them to another camp. during Nazis. And she said there were three reactions, she writes in her book. There were some people that had a little bit of excitement, maybe it's going to be better there. Some people were the opposite, they were totally depressed because they were sure it's going to be worse. And there was a third group that was totally numb. They're not excited, they're not depressed, they're just numb. They were already so beaten, so drained, so exhausted, and no feeling left at all. So, in a sense, that's what it says about the Jews in Egypt. They were in Egypt 210 years. When Moshe came and said, "Yay, we're going out of Egypt," they were like, "Yeah, what else is new?" They just didn't believe it. So here too, it says when Mashiach is going to come, we'll have a similar situation. The news is going to come that we're going out of its galus, and it seems like exciting news. But unfortunately, just like them, there were those that did not believe it and didn't accept it. Same thing will be when Mashiach comes. Yeah.
How's like the I think it was like 4/5 that didn't leave?
How's what?
The 4/5
4/5,
that
right.
didn't leave. How is that like going to be represented in this?
This is one of the things that are different. When Mashiach comes, nobody will be left behind.
Right.
The opposite.
So will there be like the same kind of effect? Like is the 4/5 represented in like
No, the opposite. This is one of the things that will not be a copy of what happened in
it's not
Egypt.
a copy, but like maybe it's I'm saying like a refuah for that or something like that is present in a different way or in a different aspect that will be like so to speak,
I guess it's present in the sense that there is
children.
resistance.
Like
In other words, then they resisted and they actually didn't go out. Now there are people who maybe don't believe it, but they will all. Resistance is sort of the parallel of what happened there. But today they will go out of those. Nobody will be left behind. Another difference is number 8 on page 71. Number 8 says Kibarach Ha'am. Let me see if I made a copy of that. I'm not sure I did. When they went out of Mitzrayim, they ran out of Egypt. Yes, we did make a copy. Page 86. Look at page 86. It says, Paro was told that the people fled, they ran out of Egypt. And we know that's the reason why we actually eat matzah, because they ran out of Egypt in such haste, there was no time for the dough to rise. What does it say about Mashiach? Look at page 87. So it's underlined. When you go out of the future galus, you will not leave in chaos, nor will you go in flight, which means you'll be running. Hashem will be before you, and God of Israel will be your rear guard. In other words, you won't have to run, you'll go out calmly. On the surface, it seems to be a little bit interesting that we're being told thousands of years in advance, when Mashiach comes, you'll walk out calmly. I mean, it is better to walk out calmly than run, but is it such a big bracha that we have to be told in advance the great good news that in Mitzrayim we ran out of Egypt, and the future galus. So the way Chassidus explains it, it's not just about running or walking out calmly. It means there'll be a different kind, a different quality of redemption. And that's why before we ran out of galus, when Mashiach comes, we're able to walk out. This is another one of the differences. What is the difference? To make a long story short, because you have to make all the longer stories shorter, because today is Tuesday and tomorrow is Wednesday. So let me try to do the best I can. When you have an enemy and there's a confrontation and you do succeed in overcoming the enemy, do you have to run away or could you walk away?
did you defeat it properly?
What?
Did you defeat it all the way?
That's the question. Did you defeat it all the way?
Answering the question of the question.
Well,
That's the way to do it. So let's say you knock out the other person, they're unconscious. You wouldn't just walk away, you would run away because you don't know when they're going to wake up and what they're going to do. But what happens if they're not alive anymore? You don't have to run. When Nissan went out of Mitzrayim, we didn't really destroy Mitzrayim completely. It wasn't transformed completely because we didn't have the power to do it then. And therefore, we had to run away. That's how the Alter Rebbe explained. We had to run away from Klippa because Klippa was still in power. When Mashiach will come, we'll be able to walk away calmly because not only will be freed of Galus, we'll transform Klippa into Kedusha. Right, but I'll explain why. The reason is like this. The difference between Mitzrayim and now, Egypt was a 1, 2, 3 thing. There were 49 gates of Tumah. They went out of Mitzrayim, boom, boom, boom. When things happen fast, it's not something which is an internal transformation. Can be. Internal transformation always has to take time and work and effort to change. So therefore, going out of Mitzrayim was like Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. That's a Resud Leila. So therefore, we weren't really transformed completely. So the Klippa was there, we had to run. On the other hand, after we went out of Mitzrayim, now we're working on Torah and mitzvahs and Mesiras Nefesh and everything we're doing for the last 3,300 years. At this point, the world has already been transformed gradually from year to year, from generation to generation, that when we finally go out of Mitzrayim through Mashiach, it'll be a total, complete transformation of the world. And therefore, we won't have to run. There's nothing to run from. The Klippa is gone. It's been transformed, and that's going to be in the times of Mashiach.
About transformation and about like the sparks that were meant to like
Elevate.
And that we've done that, and that's completed. So I think we were like learning, some girls, we like had this question of like saying brachas and like doing that. Are we still elevating those sparks even more, or is it like there's no more sparks to elevate? Or
So it's a long story. In the other class, in Mashiach Hagula, we go into it always. But to make the long story short again, is what are these sparks? The sparks are, the language in Chassidus is, there was Shviras HaKelim, the vessels broke. Remember that, those words? Which means the vessel that has to receive this infinite light that's shining in the world of Torah broke. We compare it to, God forbid, a person's body or heart, God forbid, breaks. So the neshama leaves and the body falls apart. The vessels broke, so the light, which is an infinite light, left, and the vessels broke. And these are all the sparks in this world that we have to elevate. What does elevating mean? Elevating means putting all the pieces back together again. As if you would imagine that a very precious vessel made of gold or silver or glass broke, and you can put it all back together as good as new. Imagine. So once the vessel is corrected, and that's where we're up to. The vessel is put back together over 3,300 years of hard labor. Now what? Now when we're learning Torah and we're doing mitzvah and doing brachas, we're bringing back that light that was gone because the vessels broke. That's coming back. But it's coming back with a vengeance, so to speak, much stronger than it was the first time. And as a result of that light, that's going to be the changes in this world with Mashiach. So now, then we're working more on correcting the vessels. Now we're working more on bringing down that light. To use a mushal, if something broke and I fixed it, and all the wine that was there leaked out, all the oil leaked out, once I fix it, I now pour wine in again, or new wine, new oil, new water, whatever was there. So that's what we're accomplishing now. But that's another subject. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some other things that'll be similar. Let's look at this, page 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81. It's all about one subject. What's the subject? Let's look at page 75. 75 is a medrash you're looking at, and there's a pasuk in the medrash where it says, where it's underlined, it starts off, it's a pasuk in Shir Shir, Daime Daidi Litzvi. Hashem is compared to a deer. What does that mean? Amra Knesset Yisrael HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem said as following. That's the first part. Okay, I made a circle around. There's a second part. Daime Daidi Litzvi. Just like a deer, first you see it, then it becomes hidden, then you see it again. Anybody know what that means? Did you ever walk down a road and someone said, look, there's a deer. And you look and the deer is not there. What happened? No, the deer is zigzag between the trees. It's probably a natural, it's a natural defense mechanism that Hashem put into deers. When they run, they zigzag between the trees. So when you look, you saw it, and a second later, they're behind the tree, they're blocked by the tree, and you can't see them. A little while later, you see them again, and that's how they sort of protect themselves. So compared to a deer, what's the comparison? That Kach Goyla Rishon, the first Redeemer, referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, first he appeared, then he was hidden, then he appeared again. How long was he hidden? Rabbi Chumash says 3 months. And that's what it means when it says in the Chumash that they met Moshe and Aaron because he was hidden for a few months. And then it says the same will happen with the final Redeemer. He'll be revealed, and then he'll be hidden, and then he'll be revealed again. How long will he be hidden? It says 45 days. And he brings a pasuk. Some people say it's 45 years. But let me just show you, if we turn the page again, this is a little bit easier to read. This is Rabbeinu Bachaya, one of the famous commentators on Chumash. He brings the same thing. Look what he says on the bottom. Well, there's 2 places where it's underlined, where it says that the Redeemer will be revealed first, he'll be hidden, and then revealed again. That's what it says in the Medrash. The Redeemer will be like a deer. Just like a deer is seen, and then hidden, and then seen again. So too, the first Redeemer was Moshe. He appeared, then he was hidden, and then he appeared again. How long was he hidden? The Tanchuma says 3 months. The same will be with the future redemption. The Redeemer will be revealed, then he'll be hidden, then he'll be revealed again. Because this Geula will be similar to the one in Mitzrayim. Like it says, Kimei Tzescha, which is I just told you. Page 77 is another commentator on Torah, known as the Chassam Sofer, and he says the same thing. This was a very big test, he writes. Could you imagine, Moshe comes to the Egyptians, to the Yidden, and he says, we're going out of Mitzrayim. Some people are excited, and some people don't get it. Paro comes along and makes a decree. And some people say, it's a controversy. Here it's true, it's not true. We're going out, we're not going out. Suddenly Moshe disappears. This guy who claimed that he's the Redeemer is gone. He's nowhere to be seen. By the way, he writes here that there's an opinion he was hidden for 6 months. So for 6 months, Moshe wasn't there. So he writes this was an incredibly difficult test. Imagine, after coming and making commotion, after coming and provoking Paro to make all the problems, then Moshe disappears. That gave so much strength to all those that didn't believe in Moshe. And then Moshe came back. The same will be with Mashiach. He will be hidden after he's already revealed, but Hashem will stand on the right side of the tzaddikim and give them strength to pass the test. And actually, I'm showing you Midrashim. This happens to be in a Rashi in Tanakh. If you look at page 78 and 78a, it's a pasuk in Tanakh, where it says, look at 78 on top of the page. Fortunate is he who waits and reaches days of 1,335. That's a number that's given as if nobody knows exactly what it's referring to, but it's a number when Mashiach is going to come. So look what Rashi says. Before he gave a different number, and now he gives a different number. Rashi says the number he gives here is 45 years more than the original number. So Rashi says 45 years are added to the above number because our Melech HaMashiach is destined to be hidden after it's revealed and then be revealed again. We find this in the Medrash Ruth.
Ooh, who's getting lightheaded?
What'd you say?
Yeah. I said, who else is getting lightheaded?
What is 6 weeks of years here?
6 what?
6 weeks of years. Did I read that right? And he will be concealed from them 6 weeks of years.
He will be concealed from them 6 weeks of years.
What's 6 weeks of years?
So the details and the years try not to calculate because we don't understand that, but the general idea is again another area we find the similarity. And by the way, the years, the Rebbe once spoke about the fact that it says in the Zohar, if the Mashiach comes, how long will it be till the dead will come back to life? It says in the Zohar, 40 years. So the Rebbe once said, it doesn't have to take 40 years. It can be much sooner. And what did he base it on? It says in the Chumash that the Jews were 40 years in the desert. Anyone remember the reason why? The spies. How much time did the spies spend spying? 40 days. And how much do we have to pay for it? 40 years. So Rebbe said if 40 days could become 40 years, then 40 years could become 40 days. And 40 days can become 40 hours. And 40 hours can become 40 minutes. It's not just a sort of a humorous statement. I want to explain it. It's very simple. When it says anything in the Torah that something took 40 days or will take 40 days, the reason is because whatever this inyan is, it has to go through 40 stages of development. But how will those 40 stages manifest? In 40 years, in 40 days? For example, why was the flood 40 days and 40 nights? So it says it's like a mikveh that makes a person pure, and there's 40 measurements of water in the mikveh. So here it's 40 measurements, here it's 40 days, here it's 40 years. When Moshe Rabbeinu went up to the mountain, it was again 40 days. So that means that in every area it could be different, but the one thing is the same. It must be 40 levels. And that's why in each thing there are 40 something because it goes through 40 stages. So it depends on our schus. We'll definitely have B'tchis HaMesim after 40 something. It's like it said when Mashiach comes, a woman will give birth in 9 hours. What does that mean?
Lots of kids.
What?
Lots of kids.
It means lots of kids. But why 9 hours? It should say she'll give birth in 1 day. So obviously the 9 months is a certain process you need to go through because birth takes 9 stages. But up until then, the 9 stages manifest in 9 months. When Mashiach comes, it will manifest in 9 hours. That's what the Rebbe is saying. 40 years, if we're Zeicha, could manifest in 40 days, and 40 hours, and 40 minutes, and 40 seconds. Yes, Connie. So lightheaded?
Why? Yes. Why, if it's 40, why is it 45 hidden?
Because there's something about the number 45 also.
Is it 40 plus 5 or is it like 45 or is it?
I can't reveal everything.
And then could those 45 days like Chas v'Shalom turn into 45 units or measurements? Like, is that like 45
So when it says-
No.
Again, this is not halacha. So when it comes to these kind of things, not halacha, we know that it's all, we can understand the amount of days or hours or months or years could be explained in some other metaphoric way. But one thing we do see from all these sources that just like in Mitzrayim, Moshe Rabbeinu was revealed and then hidden, revealed again, and there was a big Nisayan, and the same will be when Mashiach comes. That's one of the areas where we see the similarity, and that's more of the other sources. Okay, we'll stop here, and tomorrow we'll try to see if we can finish. I'm not sure. We'll try our best. Tomorrow we're going to split the sea.
I know, but I don't know how to hold down my phone. I didn't have to cut this and I know, I forgot. It was also so that's when I was yeah.
Never believed this. And then it's like a picture of like, so like on one side.